You're standing in your kitchen right now, hungry, staring at a snack drawer that cost you more than your grandmother spent on groceries in a week. Everything in it is stale, salty, and gone in a minute. But here's what stopped me cold. A family of 5, in 1933, fed their children homemade treats all afternoon for less than a nickel a head. And they didn't feel poor doing it. I found the proof. It was buried in a stack of government pamphlets nobody had opened in decades. 25 snacks made from flour, water, drippings, and scraps that vanished from American kitchens on purpose. Not because they stopped working, because something replaced them that made somebody rich. Stay with me, because near the end I'm going to hand you one recipe I pulled from a 1927 USDA radio broadcast that turns a single boiled potato into more than a pound of candy. And every one of these works this week on whatever money you've got left. Let me tell you how I fell into this. I wasn't looking for snacks. I was in the back room of a county historical society in southern Ohio, going through a water-stained box marked household bulletins, trying to trace something else entirely. And I kept seeing the same name typed across the top of these thin little cookbooks. Aunt Sammy. Recipes from Aunt Sammy. I had never heard of her. So I pulled the thread. And the thread didn't stop for 2 years. Aunt Sammy was not a real woman. She was a character. Starting in 1926, the United States Department of Agriculture wrote scripts for a fictional homemaker who went out over the radio to millions of American kitchens every single morning. She was, in a way, the first national cooking voice this country ever had. And in 1927, they printed her recipes in a booklet called Aunt Sammy's Radio Recipes. That booklet went into so many homes that the government printed it in Braille. Think about that. The federal government thought these recipes mattered so much that a blind mother in a farmhouse needed to be able to read them with her fingers. So I asked the obvious question. If this knowledge was important enough to print in Braille and broadcast to the whole nation, why had I, a man in my 70s who grew up around Depression survivors, never once heard the name Aunt Sammy? Where did all of it go? That question is what this whole investigation became. And the first snacks I found in those pages were so simple I almost laughed. Milk toast. You take a slice of bread, you toast it dark, you butter it thin, and you pour hot sweetened milk over it until it goes soft. That was breakfast, or an afternoon snack, or supper for a sick child. Cinnamon toast. The same idea. Toast with a little sugar and cinnamon pressed into warm butter. Sugar sandwiches, bread with butter and a sprinkle of sugar folded over. To a child in 1932, that was candy. I'll be honest with you. When I first read these, my gut reaction was pity. I thought, those poor people, that's all they had. That's what I assumed the whole time. Poverty food. Sad little scraps. But then I started reading the nutrition notes the USDA printed right alongside them, and my pity turned into something closer to embarrassment, because these weren't desperate, they were engineered. A home economist with a degree had sat down and figured out how to get fat, sugar, and grain into a growing child at the lowest possible cost per calorie. Milk toast wasn't sad. It was efficient in a way nothing in my pantry today can touch. But here's what didn't add up. And it's the thing that pulled me into the next box of records. If these recipes were so well designed and so widely known, somebody had to work to make us forget them. Snacks don't just disappear from a whole country by accident. Somebody replaced them. So I went looking for who, and that's where the story turns, because the answer wasn't a mystery at all. It was written right into the trade magazines of the time. Somebody profited enormously from convincing your grandmother that a homemade snack was a mark of shame. Let me lay it out for you. In the 1920s and 30s, the packaged food industry was young and hungry, and it had a problem. Americans made their snacks at home for pennies. You cannot sell a box of crackers to a woman who bakes her own for a fraction of the price. So the industry did something clever. It didn't attack the recipes. It attacked the feeling. Advertisements from that era, which I read on microfilm until my eyes burned, sold packaged snacks as modern, clean, and scientific. Homemade suddenly meant backward, poor. Something you did because you had to, not because you were smart. And it worked. I traced it through the advertising pages of the big women's magazines across the 1930s and 40s. Year by year, the homemade snack got pushed further back, made to feel like the thing you'd be ashamed to serve if the neighbors dropped in. By the time my own mother was raising children, the message had fully landed. Store-bought was a step up. Homemade was a step you took only when money ran out. Here's the cost of that, and it's not small. A box of crackers today runs you around $4 and disappears in 2 days. The homemade version out of Aunt Sammy's own pages, flour, a little fat, salt, and water, costs you maybe 30 cents for the same amount and stores for weeks. Over a year, a family that snacks store-bought is handing over hundreds of dollars for the privilege of feeling modern. That feeling was sold to us, and these recipes are what got buried to sell it. So let me keep pulling, because once I understood that the simple snacks were hidden on purpose, I wanted to know what else was in those boxes. And the next layer was the sweets, the candy. The thing every child wants, and no poor family can afford at the store. What I found was a whole lost art of making candy out of nothing. And this is where the records got genuinely surprising to me. Take molasses taffy. In the 1930s, molasses was one of the cheapest sweeteners in America, and families would boil it down, pour it out to cool, and then gather in the kitchen to pull it. The pulling wasn't just fun. Pulling the taffy stretches it and works air into it, turning a dark, sticky syrup into a light, chewy candy that goes pale gold. It was entertainment and dessert at the same time, and it cost almost nothing. A whole evening's worth of candy and family time out of a jar of molasses. Then there was popcorn, which was so cheap during the Depression that it became one of the few treats nobody had to feel guilty about. Families popped it in a lidded pot with a spoonful of drippings and ate bowls of it. And when there was a little corn syrup or molasses in the house, they poured it hot over the popped corn and pressed it into popcorn balls. One batch made a dozen treats for the cost of a handful of dried corn kernels. I found penny candy substitutes that never cost a penny. Horehound candy made from a wild herb that grew like a weed and was believed to soothe a cough. Peppermint drops made from boiled sugar and a few drops of oil. Sorghum candy pulled the same way as taffy. And apple peel candy, where the peels you'd normally throw away got simmered in sugar syrup until they turned into a chewy, translucent treat. Nothing wasted. Nothing bought that didn't have to be. But the record that stopped me was a fruit leather. Long before any company sold a rolled-up fruit snack in a shiny wrapper for $1 apiece, Depression families were making the exact same thing. They took overripe fruit that was about to spoil, cooked it down into a thick puree, spread it thin on a board or a clean cloth, and dried it in the sun. What they pulled off that board was a sweet, chewy strip of pure fruit that kept for months. That is the same product, molecule for molecule, that sells today in a box for real money. They made it from fruit that was one day from the compost heap. And here's the tension that kept me up. Every single one of these candies was healthier than what replaced it. No dyes, no preservatives with names you can't pronounce. Real fruit, real molasses, real herbs. The Depression child eating homemade horehound drops was, by any honest measure, eating better than the modern child with a fistful of artificial candy. We didn't trade up, we got talked into trading down and paying more to do it. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too when I first sat with these boxes. You're thinking, that's fine for somebody with a stocked kitchen, a full pantry, time to boil molasses and dry fruit in the sun. You're on a fixed income. The check comes once a month and it's spoken for before it arrives. You don't have spare fruit to dry or spare anything. I heard that voice in my own head and I almost set the whole thing down. So, I went back into the records specifically looking for you, the person with almost nothing, and the relief kitchen documents from 1932 and 1933 had exactly what I was hoping to find, because those were written for people who had less than you have right now. People with no job, no savings, and a breadline. Here is the one I want you to try this week, and it costs almost nothing. They called it a poor man's cracker, and it's the oldest snack in the book. Flour, water, a pinch of salt, and the smallest bit of any fat you have, even the grease left in the pan from breakfast. You mix it into a stiff dough, you roll it out as thin as you possibly can, thinner than you think, right on your counter. You cut it into squares, prick each one with a fork, and bake it in a hot oven until it snaps. That's a cracker. That's the whole thing. A pound of flour costs under $1 and makes more crackers than a family can eat in a week. You already own everything else. And if you want it sweet, here's the companion I found right next to it. Take yesterday's bread, the heel nobody wants. Cut it into cubes. Toss them in a pan with a spoon of fat and a little sugar and cinnamon, and toast them until they're crisp. Cinnamon crisps. Sweet, crunchy, gone in one sitting, and made entirely from the bread you are about to throw out. Nothing on that fixed check needs to be spent to make it. It comes out of what's already in your kitchen going stale. If this history of hidden knowledge hits you the way it hit me, I've gone much deeper into the economics of reclaiming these skills in my books Depression Proof, Deep Frugal, and The Full System, all available through the link in the description. They pick up exactly where these records leave off, laying out the full picture of how ordinary people rebuilt financial ground under their feet, using nothing but what was already in their kitchens and their heads. Now, back to the trail, because what those magazine pages showed me year by year tells you exactly how the shame was built and exactly who paid for it. I want you to sit with that, because it's the heart of everything I dug up. The people who invented these snacks had less than almost anyone watching me right now. And they still made their children something warm and sweet in the afternoon. Not because they had extra, because they knew how. The knowing is the wealth. That's what got taken. Not the food, the knowing. But the deeper I got, the more I realized these snacks weren't just cheap. They were doing a job we've completely forgotten a snack is supposed to do. And that job is where the records started to feel less like old recipes and more like a warning. Let me explain what I mean. In the Aunt Sammy bulletins and the extension pamphlets from the land-grant colleges, every snack came with a purpose written beside it. This one for energy in the cold. This one for a child who's been sick and needs building up. This one, made with dried beans ground fine, for protein when there's no meat. A snack in the 1930s wasn't a distraction, it was a tool. It was how you got the right thing into a body between meals. Look at what they snacked on. Roasted soybeans and roasted corn, eaten by the handful like we eat chips, full of protein and fiber. Dried apple slices and dried pumpkin, chewed like candy, carrying real vitamins through the winter. Prune whip, which was nothing but stewed prunes beaten with an egg white into a light, sweet foam that a child thought was a special dessert and a mother knew was keeping everyone regular and fed. Baked apples with a little sugar in the core, cheap, warm, and full of what the body needs. Cottage cheese, made at home from milk that had turned, spread on bread as a protein snack that cost nothing because the milk was already going sour. Every one of these fed the body while it pleased the tongue. That was the whole design. And when I compared it to what sits in my snack drawer now, I felt something I can only call anger. Because the modern snack was built to do the exact opposite. It's built to make you want more of it and get less from it. It leaves you hungry an hour later so you'll reach for the box again. The depression snack was built to fill you up and let you walk away satisfied. One of those designs serves you, the other serves the man who sells you the box. And we let them swap one for the other and call it progress. Here's a number that made me put my pen down. During the worst years of the Depression, when a quarter of the country was out of work, the children who ate these homemade snacks, The milk toast and the bean spreads and the dried fruit, in a lot of cases, were better nourished than children in some households today with a full snack cabinet. Researchers who went back and studied Depression-era diets found that the forced simplicity, the whole grains, the vegetables, the lack of sugar and processed junk actually protected people. The poverty diet, by accident and by the careful work of those home economists, was closer to what a body needs than the abundance diet we replaced it with. We got richer and ate worse. That's the thing they never advertised. So by now I had the simple snacks, the candies, and the snacks that were secretly medicine, and I thought I'd found the bottom of the box. I hadn't. Because tucked in the back, in the oldest and most fragile pamphlets, were the snacks that came from true nothing. And these are the ones that changed how I see this whole country's history. There's a thing called water pie. I read the recipe 3 times because I didn't believe it. When a family had no milk, no eggs, nothing but flour, sugar, a little butter, and water, they made a pie out of that. Water, flour, sugar, a few dots of butter, and vanilla if they had it, poured into a crust and baked. And the strange chemistry of it is that as it bakes, the flour and butter and sugar set the water into a soft, sweet, custard-like filling. A pie made from water. A dessert conjured out of a nearly empty kitchen. There is nothing sadder and nothing more triumphant in all the records I found. Right beside it was vinegar pie, made when there was no fruit at all, where a spoonful of vinegar was cooked with sugar and flour to fake the tang of a lemon nobody could afford. And mock apple pie, which is the one that truly got me, because it was made with crackers. Broken crackers, sugar, water, and cinnamon, arranged in a crust, and when it came out of the oven, it tasted so much like real apple pie that people served it to guests without telling them. There wasn't a single apple in it, just crackers and know-how and the refusal to let hard times take dessert away from the family table. And there it is again, the thing I keep circling back to. These were not recipes of despair. Read them right, and they're recipes of defiance. A woman with an empty kitchen and 3 hungry children who looked at water and flour and said, "I will still make my family something sweet tonight." That is not poverty. That is genius under pressure. And it was systematically made to feel like something to hide. Which brings me to the record I promised you at the start. The one I've been holding back. Because out of everything in those boxes, one recipe stood so far above the rest for what it can do that I've saved it for the end. This is the buried treasure at the bottom of the trail. And I found it right there in the pages I started with, Aunt Sammy's radio recipes, broadcast to the nation, and then quietly forgotten. It's called potato candy. And I need you to hear how this works. Because when I made it myself in my own kitchen to be sure it was real, I stood there laughing at how impossible it seemed. You take 1 small potato, 1. You boil it and mash it until it's smooth, and you'll have about a 1/4 cup of plain mashed potato, no butter, no milk, nothing added. Then you start working in powdered sugar. And here is the secret that no one tells you and that the records reveal. The potato is almost entirely water, and when that water hits the powdered sugar, it releases and dissolves it, and the mash keeps accepting more sugar and more and more. That one tiny potato will drink in nearly a full pound of powdered sugar and turn into a smooth, thick, white candy dough. 1 potato, a whole pound of candy. Then you roll that dough out flat, like you're rolling a pie crust. You spread it edge to edge with peanut butter, and you roll it up tight into a long log the way you'd roll a cinnamon roll. You chill it, and you slice it into little pinwheels, white candy spiraled around brown peanut butter. It looks like something out of a fancy confectionery shop window. It tastes like a professional made it, and the entire cost is 1 potato, a bag of powdered sugar, and a spoon of peanut butter. For pennies, you produce a plate of candy that would cost you real money at any store, and there's no baking, no thermometer, no skill required. You can make it this weekend on the smallest budget there is. That recipe was going out over the radio to millions of American homes in 1927. It was printed for the blind to read with their fingers. And within 2 generations it was gone, replaced by a candy bar in a wrapper that costs $1.50 and leaves you with nothing but the wrapper. That's the trade we made. That's the whole story in one plate of pinwheels. They had the genius. We got the wrapper. I made that potato candy standing at my own counter, a man in his 70s who'd spent his whole life assuming the old ways were just poverty dressed up in nostalgia. And when I sliced into that log and saw those perfect white and brown spirals made from a single potato, I finally understood what I'd actually been digging up in that Ohio basement. It was never a box of sad recipes. It was a stolen inheritance. Every one of these 25 snacks was proof of the same quiet theft. They didn't take these things from us at gunpoint. They took them by making us ashamed of them, one advertisement at a time, until a whole country forgot that it once knew how to make candy out of a potato and pie out of water. You were meant to forget. That plate of pinwheels was meant to stay buried. And now it's sitting in front of you again. If you're the kind of person who's always suspected that the real skills, the ones that make you free, got quietly swapped out for things that keep you paying, then you already know these records weren't lost by accident. You come from the people who knew how to do this. It's in you. It was just buried. So tell me something down in the comments, because I read them and I answer. Out of all of these, which one did your own family make? Was it the milk toast, the popcorn balls, the mock apple pie, the sugar sandwiches your grandmother folded over for you? Or did you never hear of a single one, and now you're wondering what else got taken? Write it down for me. Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me which of these 25 you're going to make first. I want to know if the potato candy is as forgotten as I think it is. And if any part of this made you feel like something was taken from you that should have been passed down, then don't just watch and leave. This channel exists to dig these records back up, one buried document at a time, and hand them back to the people they were stolen from. Subscribe and stand with the rest of us who are recovering what was meant to stay forgotten. Because the next box I opened had something even stranger in it, a way Depression families kept meat safe for months with no refrigerator and no ice, using one thing already sitting in your cupboard right now. I traced it to a farm bulletin from 1931, and once you see it, you'll never look at your kitchen the same way again. That's where we go next. Don't miss it. Before you go, let me tell you where this goes next. This video gave you the story, but inside the hard time circle, I hand you the rest, straight from the original bulletins. And if a step ever puzzles you, you ask me right there, and I answer you myself. Not some machine. You won't be alone either. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime. Come join me.